The past few months have been rough for the United Kingdom. Energy prices are soaring. National inflation has breached double digits. The longest-serving British monarch has died. The shortest-serving Prime Minister has quit. Behind the lurid headlines, however, is a deeper story of decades-long economic dysfunction that holds lessons for the future. Britain chose finance over industry, austerity over investment, and a closed economy over openness to the world. In other countries' imagination, the UK is not only a political parent but also cultural co-partner. A wealthy nation that gave us modern capitalism and the Industrial Revolution. But strictly by the numbers, Britain is pretty poor for a rich place. UK living standards and wages have fallen significantly behind those of Western Europe. By some measures, in fact, real wages in the UK are lower than they were 15 years ago, and will likely be even lower in 2023. This calamity was decades in the making. After World War II, Britain's economy grew slower than those of much of continental Europe. By the 1970s, the Brits were having a national debate about why they were falling behind and how the former empire had become a relatively insular and sleepy economy. Under Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s, markets were deregulated, unions were smashed, and the financial sector emerged as a jewel of the British economy. Thatcher's injection of neoliberalism had many complicated knock-on effects. But from the 1990s into the 2000s, the British economy roared ahead, with London's financial boom leading the way. Britain, which got rich as the world's factory in the 19th century, had become the world's banker by the 21st. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, it hit hard, smashing the engine of Britain's economic ascent. Wary of rising deficits, the British government pursued a policy of austerity, fretting about debt rather than productivity or aggregate demand. The results were disastrous. Real wages fell for 6 straight years. Facing what the writer Fintan O'Toole called the dull anxiety of declining living standards, conservative polls sniffed out a bogeyman to blame for this slow-motion catastrophe. They served up to anxious voters a menu of scary outsiders: bureaucrats in Brussels, immigrants, asylum seekers, anybody but the actual decision-makers who had kneecapped British competitiveness. A cohort of older, middle-class, grievously nostalgic voters demanded Brexit, and they got it. In the past 30 years, the British economy chose finance over industry, Britain's government chose austerity over investment. And British voters chose a closed and poorer economy over an open and richer one. The predictable results are falling wages and stunningly low productivity growth. Although British media worry about robots taking everybody's jobs, the reality is closer to the opposite. Between 2003 and 2018, the number of automatic roller car washes, that is, robots washing your car, declined by 50%, while the number of hand car washes, that is, men with buckets, increased by 50%. The Economist commentator Duncan Weldon told in an interview in plain English. It's more like the people are taking the robots' jobs. That might sound like a quirky example, because the British economy is obviously more complex than blokes rubbing cars with soap. But it's an illustrative case. According to the International Federation of Robotics, the UK manufacturing industry has less technological automation than just about any other similarly rich country. With barely 100 installed robots per 10,000 manufacturing workers in 2020, its average robot density was below that of Slovenia and Slovakia. One analysis of the UK's infamous productivity puzzle concluded that outside of London and finance, almost every British sector has lower productivity than its Western European peers. Thus, the UK, the first nation to industrialize, was also the first to deindustrialize. Britain gave rise to the productivity revolution that changed the world, and now it has some of the worst productivity statistics of any major economy. What was once the world's most powerful globalized empire has now voted to explicitly reduce global access to trade and talent. Since Brexit, immigration, exports, and foreign investment have all declined, likely reducing the size of the UK's economy by several percentage points in the long run. London's financial prowess has concealed the overall economy's weakness in innovation and manufacturing. Or, as the economic analyst Matt Klein puts it, take out Greater London, and the UK is one of the poorest countries in Western Europe. Today, Britain seems trapped between a left-wing aversion to growth and a right-wing aversion to openness. On the academic left, the UK has lately been home to a surging movement called degrowtherism, which asserts that saving the planet requires rich countries to stop seeking growth. On the right, the electorate is dominated by older voters who care more about culture wars than about competitiveness. In 2019, when Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party won a big majority in the House of Commons, most people of working age did not vote for them. You have this post-economic, older, economically insulated voting bloc that could afford to be anti-growth almost as a luxury, because they don't have to care about economic outcomes. The UK is now an object lesson for other countries dealing with a dark trade of deindustrialization, degrowth, and denigration of foreigners. Having offshored industry in favor of finance, its economy wasn't resilient. The resulting erosion in living standards made the public desperate for something to blame. Blame-seeking conservatives spotted bogeymen abroad. Brexit cut off the economy from further growth and set the stage for a rolling political circus. The US has a different menu of problems from the UK's. But here too, politicians are navigating an industrial sector in structural decline. A political left that is often skeptical about the virtues of economic growth. And a political right that is organized in part around hating foreigners. Enemies of progress can criticize the legacy of industrialization, productivity, and globalization. But the UK shows us what can happen when a rich country seems to reject all three. Rather than transforming into some post-economic Eden of good vibes, it becomes bitter, flailing, and nonsensical. The worst is yet to come. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.